position to judge anybody, and I want to make it quite clear that I didn't.
I don't want to ever see my mother have to go through this again. Never, Jeffrey. Jeffrey, I hate you, mother. I hate you. Something's out of control.
In Daytona Beach, Florida, 18-year-old Raymond Frolander was savagely beaten by the father of an 11-year-old boy he had just assaulted.
18-year-old Raymond Frolander standing before a judge charged with sexual battery, his face swollen and bruised.
Frolander, a family friend who was babysitting the victim, was caught red-handed by the boy's father, Jason, who attacked him furiously.
I attacked him viciously, and I didn't stop. The only time I paused was to go to the kitchen and retrieve a butcher knife because I was going to kill him.
Jason made it clear that he would have ended Frolander's life if his son hadn't stepped in.
My son stepped in front of me and saved his life. He just looked at me and said, "Sir," and he shook his head and just, "No." And I just put the knife down.
When the police arrived, they found Frolander unconscious and bleeding. No charges were pressed against Jason, as he was acting to protect his child from a crime in progress. Later, Frolander pleaded no contest to charges of lewd and lascivious molestation and was sentenced to 25 years behind bars. Jason, however, made it clear that during those years, Frolander would come to understand why he was allowed to live. Clark Fredericks stood in a New Jersey courtroom before Judge Thomas J. Critchley, facing charges that told a story far deeper than a simple murder accusation. Fredericks wasn't just a man on trial. He was a survivor of unspeakable abuse, seeking justice for a childhood stolen from him.
From the time that I was 8 years old until I was 12 years old, I was sexually assaulted and raped by Dennis Peck. It started out with him wanting to touch my scar that I had from open heart surgery at the age of 6. It progressed to wrestling matches and eventually led to him raping me.
For years, Fredericks was sexually abused by Dennis Pegg, a former Boy Scout leader he once admired and trusted. The trauma of those years festered inside him, fueling a rage that never went away. That rage finally exploded on June 12, 2012. Fredericks, along with his friend Robert Reynolds, went to Pegg's home, armed with a knife.
He took the kitchen knife that I had been sharpening, and the very same hunting knife that Dennis taught me as a young boy how to sharpen. I took the hunting knife and gave Bob the kitchen knife. Bob drove us there in his van as I gave him direction.
What started as a confrontation turned violent as Fredericks brutally stabbed Pegg, ending the life of the man he blamed for destroying his future.
I started stabbing Dennis. I said over and over to him, "How does it feel raping little kids now?" I also repeated, "It's not so fun raping little kids now, is it?" At the end, I slit his throat.
When arrested, Fredericks didn't deny his actions. In court, he said, "I did what I felt I had to do to stop the nightmare." He explained his years of torment, emphasizing it was a desperate act, not revenge. Judge Critchley faced a tough decision. Fredericks pled guilty to manslaughter, avoiding a murder charge. The courtroom reacted with mixed emotions, some applauding his stance. No one from Pegg's family commented, and prosecutors called the plea deal a fair resolution for closure. The judge stated that the sentence, ranging from 5 to 10 years, would be handed down in September.
The judge said the sentence, anywhere from 5 to 10 years in prison, will be announced in September. At the Sussex County Courthouse, Dave Carlin.
Fredericks left the courtroom acknowledging that his actions, driven by years of trauma, had ended Pegg's life. But they also marked the painful end of his own nightmare. Stephen Sanderson was already in prison for life, serving time for murder. In 2014, he got a new cellmate named Ted Dyer, who was a convicted child molester. From the moment they became cellmates, the atmosphere was tense. Sanderson said he couldn't stand sharing a room with someone like Dyer, and his anger grew over time. According to Sanderson, Dyer began bragging about his crimes, and that was the last straw. One night, as Dyer lay in bed, Sanderson snapped. He strangled Dyer in their cell, killing him.
I guess he decided to clear his conscience or something, but, he told me what he was in prison for, that he had, was accused of raping an 11-year-old girl, and he got 25 to life for it, and, I told him that's enough, I don't want to hear anymore. I first punched him a couple times, still wouldn't shut up. Still kept telling me he wanted to explain that he didn't do it, that he was being set up and all this stuff, and I don't know, I just got mad and then hit him and and then I killed him.
The next day, Sanderson stood in front of Judge Amy Hathaway in Michigan and confessed calmly to what he had done, showing no regret. Sanderson explained he couldn't let Dyer live after the harm he'd done to children.
My position to judge anybody, and I want to make it quite clear that I didn't judge him. You know, I know God is the only judge we have. I've just set the appointment up. So I don't feel bad for what I did, you know. I feel bad for maybe the families, his family or something. But as far as remorse towards him, no.
Judge Hathaway had to give Sanderson another life sentence. Since he was already serving life without parole, this meant he would be in prison for good. On February 2nd, 2018, in Eaton County, Michigan, Margraves showed up in court to support his daughters, who bravely shared their stories about the abuse they suffered from Larry Nassar.
I tore my hamstring in my right leg. This was when he started performing the procedure that we are all now familiar with.
The next visit was for my shoulder, which I then found out my hips were out of alignment, which then made my spine and my pelvic bone out of alignment as well. And this is when Larry decided that it was medically acceptable to violate a 16-year-old girl.
Nassar was a doctor for Michigan State University and the USA Gymnastics team. He was accused of sexually abusing hundreds of young female athletes while pretending to provide medical treatment.
Nassar typically carried out his abuse under the guise of a medical treatment. He hijacked a rare pelvic therapy that involves vaginal penetration and used it to treat all sorts of ailments. He ignored protocols such as using a glove, asking consent, or having a medical chaperone present.
When one daughter spoke about her painful experience, Margraves became very emotional. He asked the judge for 5 minutes alone with Nassar, but was denied. In his anger, he tried to rush at Nassar. Court officers quickly stopped him, and the courtroom became chaotic as many people cried and reacted to the scene. Margraves was handcuffed and taken out of the courtroom, but later returned to face potential charges. He wasn't charged with any crime and apologized for losing control after hearing his daughter's story. Larry Nassar received a sentence of 40 to 175 years in prison for his crimes, plus an additional 60 years for possessing child pornography. Christopher Elwell was found guilty of assaulting a 4-year-old girl in Dover, New Hampshire, back in June 2017. He was sentenced to spend between 7.5 to 15 years in prison for this crime.
The sexual assault happened in Dover back on June 24th into the 25th. The victim came over to a home where Elwell was staying. A 9-year-old and another 4-year-old girl were also there.
And they described him showing them videos of sexual acts similar to the ones that she had done.
At first, Elwell denied the accusations, but later in court, he admitted to the crime. He also pleaded guilty to not registering as a sex offender, as he had another conviction from 2008.
The defendant was required to register as a sex offender and had been living at 12 Mineral Park Drive off and on, but more than 5 times a month, and had not changed his registration with the Summers.
Josiah Davies, who was also in court for a probation violation hearing, was seated close to Elwell. As Elwell waited for his arraignment, Davies suddenly attacked him, headbutting him several times before deputies could step in. The attack shocked everyone in the courtroom. Judge Stephen M. Horan was in charge of sentencing both Elwell and Davies. After the attack, Elwell was taken to the hospital, while Davies faced more charges for his actions and could get an extra 3.5 to 7 years in prison for the assault.
What was going on and what the family motives were there.
Michael, if you watch some of the documentaries that have been made about this, there was the lady next door that lived next door to him, and she kept complaining, but she didn't want to lose her housing, and so she was walking a fine line.
Jeffrey Dahmer was born on May 21, 1960 in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. As a child, he seemed like any other kid, but as he got older, things started to change. By the time he graduated high school in 1978, he had developed a strange fascination with dead animals and was struggling with heavy drinking. Only weeks after finishing school, Dahmer committed his first murder. He picked up a hitchhiker named Stephen Hicks. After a night of drinking together, Dahmer hit Hicks with a dumbbell when Hicks tried to leave. He then hid Hicks' body and later buried the remains in his backyard. Despite admitting to horrible acts, including cannibalism, Dahmer claimed he was looking for forgiveness, calling his actions a holocaust. Years went by before Dahmer would kill again. After serving in the army, he returned home and fell deeper into alcoholism. By the mid-1980s, he was luring men to his apartment to drug, assault, and kill them. His methods became more brutal, involving dismemberment and cannibalism. On July 22, 1991, Dahmer's crimes finally came to an end when one of his intended victims, Tracy Edwards, escaped and alerted the police.
This guy is so nice, and all of a sudden, it's like he was pulling knives and handcuffs and all on me,
What'd you do? What'd you say to him?
I asked him what the problem was, that it's not necessary to do this,
What'd he say?
He told me at that point if I wouldn't do what he said, he would kill me,
When authorities entered Dahmer's apartment, they found a horrifying scene filled with photos of dismembered bodies and human remains. Dahmer was arrested and later confessed to killing 17 young men. His trial began in January 1992. He claimed he was insane, but the jury found him sane and guilty.
I didn't ever want freedom. Frankly, I wanted death for myself. This was a case to tell the world that I did what I did not for reasons of hate. I hated no one. I knew I was sick or evil or both. Now I believe I was sick.
At the trial during the emotional victim impact statement, Rita Isbell, the mother of one of Jeffrey Dahmer's victims, broke down and rushed toward Dahmer. However, she was restrained by the officers present.
Whatever your name is, Satan, I'm mad. This is how you act when you are out of control. I don't want to ever see my mother have to go through this again. Never, Jeffrey. Jeffrey, I hate you, mother. I hate you. Something's out of control. Don't, Jeffrey, I kill you. God damn it. Look at me, motherfucker. I kill you.
What's your name, fast?
On February 17, 1992, he was sentenced to 15 life sentences. Dahmer was killed in prison on November 28, 1994, closing a dark chapter in criminal history. What's your opinion on families taking matters into their own hands? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more videos.